Ladies and gentlemen, Psalms 86 verses 1, 2, and 17 say, "Bow down your ear, O Lord, hear me, for I am poor and needy. Preserve my soul, for I am holy. O thou my God, save your servant that trusts in you. Show me a token for good, that they which hate me may see it and be ashamed. Because you, Lord, you have helped me and comforted me." And this scripture is going to be very relevant to what we're talking about, which has to do with the Amazons. But first and foremost, if you're going to leave a comment in the comment section below, don't forget to put behind it hashtag release the Snyder cut. If you don't put hashtag release the Snyder cut, then you may find that your comment is no longer on my channel or no longer on this video. Okay, so don't forget to put hashtag release the Snyder cut if you are someone who really wants to push for releasing the Snyder cut. If not, then don't leave a hashtag at all, okay? And that just goes for one of my subscribers who did that on one of the other videos, and I just removed it, okay? And the reason is because I want us to push for the Snyder cut. This is a push now in the direction of that. We can't just sit back on our laurels and expect the Snyder cut to come. And no, you have to make a statement. So that's what we're doing. We are in complete support with anyone who wants the Snyder cut right now. We may not agree with them on what they think about the Justice League movie, but right now the push is to get a Snyder cut. Okay? Let's get into what we're talking about today. And it has to do a very interesting thing that really is a part of Wonder Woman and who she is, and that is the lasso of Wonder Woman. But we'll also, on a side note, talk also about Wonder Woman and how she changed over the years in terms of being armored up. So we'll talk about all of that. So if you look here, Wonder Woman issue number 1, you will see that Wonder Woman is holding the lasso in her hand and she's swirling it around. So the very first issue of Wonder Woman, that is her own comic, not Sensation Comics now, number 1. That's a totally different story. But in her own comic, Wonder Woman, she starts off with the lasso of Hestia. That is the lasso of Hestia you're watching there, which is the lasso of truth. We later find out it's the lasso of Hestia, and we later find out that it's the lasso of truth. It makes people tell the truth. And that carries on to this present day with the present day Wonder Woman, where she has that lasso of Hestia on her side, which you can see right here. And in addition, she carries other armaments. She carries, for instance, arm guards and armored up armor for her chest, like a coat of mail almost, but it's armored for her chest and her back. She also carries a shield, and she also carries a sword, as well as she's armored up for her feet. She's much more armored up than the original Wonder Woman, who had bracelets, arm guards, small arm guards, and mainly she had clothing on, and then she had some boots, but she was not as armored up as the present day Wonder Woman. I thought this is very interesting just to mention on the side note as we're talking about the lasso of Hestia, the lasso of truth. And we're going to look at really where does this lasso of truth come from? Because we're going to find out some very interesting things as we move along. So, Wonder Woman was first introduced to us in BVS, that is on the cinematic level. And she was wielding the lasso of truth, the lasso of Hestia, which bound Doomsday in a very awesome, very much a masterpiece of a film, a Shakespearean drama tragedy, which even the music for that moment is just so Shakespearean and emotional, because there's this moment of epic weight and epic proportion that, you know, you just can't trade in. And so that's the first time we saw Wonder Woman. Then we were introduced to her later on in her own film, Wonder Woman. And there again is the lasso of Hestia. But notice again, she's very much armored up. Again, this is like the rebirth Wonder Woman that we saw. She's very much armored up. She's got the shield, the sword, the lasso. She can also throw a spear. We see all of that in her movie, Wonder Woman. In fact, we see her use the lasso in Wonder Woman. Here, we see her use it multiple times in the movie. But there, you see her there lassoing Ares. And then here in Justice League, the movie after Wonder Woman, we see her also using the lasso of Hestia and compelling mankind to tell the truth. Very important. And so I just wanted to highlight that. Of course, in Wonder Woman, very interestingly enough, we see some of the Amazons using the lasso of Hestia, which Wonder Woman actually ends up stealing I have to chuckle about that. But the interesting thing is that she is the one telling Steve Trevor about this lasso of Hestia, while Menelope, who is a head of the Amazons, one of the high ranking officers of the Amazon and the head of the god sort of thing in there, she's like a priestess. She is wielding the lasso of Hestia, and which is very interesting is seeing Steve Trevor wonder what the heck that thing is, and Diana is explaining to him that's the lasso of Hestia that compels people to tell the truth, and then Menelope goes on to explain a lot more about it to Steve Trevor. And we see Hippolyta in Justice League use a lasso. It's not the lasso of Hestia, but we see her use a lasso. So it tells us that Diana didn't just out of the clear blue sky know how to use a lasso. She just automatically knew how to use a lasso. No, it means that she was trained, she was taught to use a lasso by the Amazons. So I find this very interesting. Not only did we see Hippolyta using a lasso, but we also saw Vanilia use the lasso. Vanilia was the queen's head of the Queen's Royal Guard. Okay, and see her use the lasso right there, and literally just remove the mother box from Steppenwolf's grasp. Okay, and she just absolutely used the mother box there. And when we look at Vanilia, when we look at Vanilia here, we see that in the Justice League movie, she actually has a place for that lasso. You can see she actually has a place for the lasso. She has the sword. She has the shield. In fact, she is dressed and geared up almost like how Wonder Woman is geared up. And this is very important to remember, okay? And so here we have Vanilia from the comics. We have Vanilia in the First Age when they had the first Great War. You see her there. And then we see her in Wonder Woman here. That was back in World War I, 1918. This date here is a little bit off. I think it wasn't 10,000 years ago. It could have been 10,000 years ago before the Great War. It could have been. This person put 10,000 years ago. I don't think that was. The Great War was around 5,000 years ago. But anyway, that's beside the point. So maybe this person, which is Wonderborn. Shout out to Wonderborn for this from IG. Excuse me. Of course, from the comics, 10,000 years ago could be where he got that information from, because the Amazons were around like forever. So here's the important thing to understand, though. When you look at Vanilia over time, she gets geared up even more over time. So when you see her here 10,000 years ago, you'll notice the Amazons are not that geared up. And what's interesting is if you look at the contemporaries of the Amazons, whether it's the Atlanteans, whether it's the tribes of men, whether it's the tribes of men, you will notice that they are much more dressed up and much more armored up than the Amazons. But if you pay attention, and I'll show you it in a minute, the Amazons are as geared up as the gods. So there's something going on there, and I'll show you what I'm talking about in a minute. All right? But you see in the beginning, in the First Age, when they have the Great War, you see the Amazons are not dressed up as much. They're not armored up as much as later on. You see here, Vanilia is much more armored up, and then here she's even much more armored up than she was there. So I find that very interesting, and much more modernized in her armor. So as time goes along, they get more and more armored up, the Amazons, which is interesting. So here's Vanilia from Wonder Woman. She is the Queen's Royal Guard. She's an expert at riding the horse. She's an expert at weaponry. She has everything. You notice she has headgear here, protective headgear, which we see also later on in Justice League. And here she is the head of the Queen's Royal Guard. Menelope is one of the heads of, she's like the head of priestess, and also she's also the head of the military in certain respects, even though she's more diplomatic and she deals with things in politics and so on. And then we have the great Queen Hippolyta herself. And again, the Queen Hippolyta is basically, she's basically the mode from which we got Diana. Wonder Woman could not be Wonder Woman without Hippolyta, period. Okay, Hippolyta basically put into Diana everything that is necessary for Diana to care about mankind and so on. Hippolyta is the key. Just that Hippolyta doesn't go messing with mankind anymore. Okay? Now, what's important anyway is that when you look at the dress, all right, this is from the Great War, you look at the dress of the Amazons back then to the Amazons now, you would notice a couple differences. Key. Yes, the Amazons are also underdressed, but there's something else going on here, and I want to show you right now. So if you look at the Amazons, the first thing you will notice is that all the weaponry that they use in present time, they've used back then. They have here, you see they have swords. They use swords. They're experts at bow and arrow. You can see that they have the spear. They're experts at spear. They ride horses. Okay, if you look very carefully on the horses, you will see their shields on the horses. There's a shield right there. So they use shields. Okay. But as you notice, they are quite dressed down. They are not as armored up as, say, some other people at that time in the world. You look at the Amazons, the Atlanteans, whoever else, and you will see that they are less armored up than they are. Okay, and that's very important to note. Okay, when you look at the Amazons here, you will notice they are less armored up. Okay, they have their belly buttons, their arms. Some of them don't even have arm guards. If you look, there's no arm guard for this Amazonian. Let me just go back a little bit so you can see. Have a look. No arm guard here. No arm guards. Okay. Some of them don't even have foot guards. Some of them do, but they have varying foot guards. See, this one doesn't have as much as this one. This one has much more leather on, you know, to protective skins to protect their feet. Some don't. Okay. Some have little braces for their arms to protect their arms. Some don't. Okay. This is very important to remember. Remember these things. Okay. But of all the weaponry they have, we're not seeing them using lassos. So if you look at the Amazons at this point in time, they're not using lassos. Isn't that interesting? And that's the point I wanted to give. They're not using lassos. Why aren't they using lassos? We saw them using lassos in Justice League. We saw them use a lasso of Hestia in Wonder Woman. But they're not using lassos here. They're using everything else but lassos. And they're not as armored up. And more importantly, some of them are fighting wars without arm guards. They have no kinds of arm guards. But, let me just make a point here so you can see something here. Some of them do have arm guards, okay? Okay. So, okay, no problem. I'll show that. So if you look at them here, this picture, which comes from Wonder Woman, it wasn't featured in Wonder Woman, but it comes from Wonder Woman, the same artist who did it, the stuff for Wonder Woman. You will notice that the Amazons, they're fighting side by side with Mankind, who has arm guards. If you look at them, they have arm guards and stuff. But the Amazons don't have arm guards. They have every kind of weapon. They have bows and arrows. They have shields. They have spears. They have swords. But they don't have lassos. And they don't have arm guards. Well, some of them may have arm guards. As we will look, I'll show you some stuff. But for a season, they walked with Mankind. And in the Great War, that was a culmination of that, where they worked together. All the tribes of man worked together. Amazons, Atlanteans, and the gods themselves. Everybody worked together to push back Steppenwolf's apocalyptic forces. But after that, they were betrayed by Mankind. And this here is the art depicting that betrayal. They were betrayed by Mankind. Let me say that again. They were betrayed by Mankind. You remember that? You remember, when they were telling the story, Hippolyta and Antiope, they were talking about that, and they were put into bondage and slavery. And here's the interesting thing about it. Bondage and slavery. What do you notice here? What is this? Isn't this like somebody put into a neck loop, almost like a lasso? Isn't that like a lasso right there? And look at Mankind. Look how they're armored up to the hilt with shields and stuff, and they got arm guards and stuff. And what's happening to their hands? Their hands are bound together. Now, just from normal Wonder Woman lore, if you go and read Wonder Woman comic number 1, they talk about how they have been put in bonds because Hercules deceived the Amazons, Queen Hippolyta particularly, and therefore was able to get the golden girdle. I don't know if that's part of this this mythology here for the DCU, but it tricks Hippolyta, and then they get bonded into slavery. Now, Hippolyta pleads and prays to the god, which is in this case would have been Aphrodite's. I don't know if Aphrodite's is a god in this particular story, but of course the gods created the Amazon, so maybe that is the case, maybe it is not. I don't know. But the point is, she pleads to Aphrodite. Aphrodite is able to help her secure back the girdle, and they break free from Mankind. They're able to break their bonds and be free from Mankind. And as a result of a reminder to them, they wear these arm guards, or what we call arm bracelets, all right, to remember their bondage. Now that's the general story. Now I don't know how the DC will go according to that story precisely or exactly according to that story, but I want to show you something. So when we look at it here, there's the Amazons. It's the end of the Great War. We see Hippolyta right here. She's very big, powerful, tall. This is Menelope. This is Antiope. That's Penthesilea in the back there. But the interesting thing about them is, if you look at them, they have these little arm guards, some of them. Antiope has one, Hippolyta has one, but some of the Amazons don't have arm guards. So you see this Amazon has a little arm guard there. Some of the Amazons have arm guards, and some of the Amazons don't have arm guards. See, this one doesn't have it. This one has. This one is a different one. This one has. This is Philippus. She has an arm guard on one hand, but she doesn't have it on the next hand. This Amazon has arm guards. This Amazon has arm guards. This is Menelope. This is Antiope. This is Vanilia. Okay, that's not Antiope. Sorry, this is Hippolyta. I don't know where Antiope is. This is Penthesilea in the background here, right? And if you look at Penthesilea, she does not have an armor guard on. Now, what I'm trying to say is the Amazons, before they were put into slavery, tricked into slavery, okay, however that story goes, they didn't all wear arm guards. They used it, of course, for protection. You know, if you're wielding a sword or whatever, they'd use it as protection. But notice that their arm guards were small. And I want to just harken you back to the very first comic book of Wonder Woman. That's her own comic book. Don't forget, hashtag release the Snyder cut in the comment section below, wherever comments you make. But you will notice that the very first Wonder Woman, she had these tiny little arm guards, which we call arm bracelets. And they were, again, kind of maybe metallic, maybe leathery, I don't know. But her clothing also was mostly clothing, right? She had boots, which is leather and stuff. And you know what's interesting to me when I look at the Amazons here? Which I'm trying to get to really quickly here. When I look at them in their dress, they remind me of the early version of Wonder Woman, where she's mostly dressed up in clothing. She has like leather stuff and stuff to protect her. And if you notice there, that Amazon used a spear really nicely there and speared that guy. But the point is, they were mostly leather gear. Even their boots and everything was leather gear. And I just feel like Zack Snyder's paying a tribute to Wonder Woman by starting off with the early versions of the Wonder Woman. And the early versions of the Wonder Woman didn't have all of that great gear like the rest of the world. So if you look at, for instance, these early Wonder Women here, they all are dressed mostly in clothing. Okay, yes, it still kind of gives them some protection. It's kind of leatherish, right? They have some little leatherish boots, right? They're not in pink and they're not in red and blue and whatever else is the color. I think it's yellow that Wonder Woman carries. No, they don't have those things. But if you notice, their little bracelets on their hands, when they do have, are small, just like Wonder Woman. I thought that was like a shout back to the early Wonder Woman comics, and I just thought that was just brilliant what Zack Snyder was doing, and an evolution, and if people could just see what he was doing. But a lot of people, I heard these feminists and these people calling, oh, they dressed underdressed and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, God damn, man, you people are so stupid. Can't you see what's going on, the origins of Wonder Woman here? And so, you know, Antiope, she's kind of dressed like that. And what's interesting about it as well, like I was saying, is that when you look at the tribes of men, they are really dressed up to the hilt. Look at it, they're armored up, like real iron up in here. They got iron helmets and stuff. The Amazons ain't got no helmets or nothing, you know. And when you look at the Atlanteans, they're armored up to the teeth. You know what I'm saying? They really armored up, you know, and there's an Amazonian right next to them. But if you look at the gods also are not armored up that much. And I thought that was very interesting, except for Ares, the god of war. He's kind of armored to the teeth. But other than him, I mean, Zeus and Artemis, they're not armored up that much either. And it just dawned on me that the Amazons were created by the gods. So it would make sense that the Amazons weren't all that armored up, because the gods weren't all that armored up. And I'm pretty sure the Amazons were taught to use the bow and arrow and to fight based on the different gods. Like Artemis was the god of war as well, and she was a strategician, so I wouldn't be surprised. And they even have her statue. Now I think about it, they have Artemis' statue in when you look in Themyscira, you see different statues of different gods, and usually they're women, and you see Artemis' statue there. And then when you think about it, Diana was actually she was actually also doing a statue which was Artemis. And then if we think about it, Hippolyta had Artemis's bow. How she got the bow, I don't know. But it's just interesting that Maybe she got the bow because Artemis was trying to fight against Ares. Who knows? But at the end of the day, we see that the Amazons and the gods, they have a lot in common. Okay? And so what I'm saying is that when you look at the Amazons here, they're not, first of all, there are two very important things about the lasso of Hestia, or the lasso period. You would find that the Amazons, they're not as heavily armored as the rest of the world. And the reason, they're armored more like the gods. And the reason is, first of all, the Amazons, their thing is moving swiftly, quickly, to the point, and they're very adept. They're very agile, okay? They move swiftly, quickly, to the point, okay? There are some very strong ones of them, but at the end of the day, the Amazons, what they use in their tactics in warfare is swiftness, quickness, and agility, like Spartans, okay? That's what they do, okay? They're not going to be weighed down by all this armament. So as a result of that, you'd find that the Amazons, even to this day, their armor is not as elaborate. But here's the cool thing I was trying to point out. After their bondage and slavery, you see that they're more armored up than they were before. So here's the early Amazons here, and you see how they're armored up here. And when you see the later Amazons, they are much more armored up. Look at that. She's got this longer, much longer arm guard, and there's this metamorphosis into what Wonder Woman is today. So they're much more armored up. They have much more gear. They are much more trained in just defending themselves. All right. Remember, they started off as agents of love to bring mankind together. And they learned how to fight. And I believe the gods trained them in that. And then they just perfected that over millennia. Okay? Millennia after millennia, they just perfected the art of fighting. So they're not any joke. They're just not joke. Okay? And so this is where Wonder Woman was birthed from. I do believe the lasso of Hestia came after the Amazons were betrayed. And the lasso of Hestia was to make sure that any interfacing with any being who is trying to build a league with them or they encounter, they would be able to extract the truth from them. Okay, and we saw Diana try to extract the truth from Ares. We saw that the lasso of Hestia could be used on mankind to extract the truth from them so that the Amazons would never be betrayed. And in so doing, it seems the Amazons learned the art of also using the lasso as a weapon of choice. And so they could lasso different things, and it seems that they were very good at that, and that's how Diana was learned the skill of the lasso. So what we see here is a number of different things. A number of different things we realize about the Amazons. And of course, they get more armored up because now they realize they're greater threats. Even people amongst them could be a threat, so they armored up themselves even more. So what we see is this evolution from the Amazons here, the early Amazons, to the later Amazons, who are much more armored up now than they were before. I like to use this one. And this time, the modern Amazons, they actually have lassos, whereas the ancient Amazons, they didn't have lassos. In fact, they didn't even have these really adept arm guards and so on. And I wouldn't be surprised even when they're not fighting, they wear arm guards. And I guess that's now the reason is because of being deceived by mankind, and as a reminder to them never to be tricked by mankind into anything. So they're very wary of mankind. Diana is much more of an exception to the rule. Diana is much more trusting of mankind. She's still very wise, but she's much more trusting of mankind than, say, the Amazons. But they are extremely wary of mankind because of what happened to them and their past, their bondage. So I thought this was something very interesting for you guys to check out and to find out more about. And I thought I would share this video with you guys. If you enjoyed this video, leave your comments in the comment section below. Don't forget, you must put release the Snyder cut. Now we see how Wonder Woman evolves from this version of Wonder Woman to this version of Wonder Woman, and how I believe the DCU is accounting for that over time, which I think is really awesome. The comics already accounted for it, but I think this account by the DCU makes it so much more real. And I just wanted to fill in the gaps there because I think there's some interesting things about the Amazons that we would always love to find out. You can't get enough on the Amazons. I mean, for those of you who know, you just can't have enough discussion, talk on the Amazons. They're just fantastic. And the thing about it is, what makes Wonder Woman who she is the Amazons. So, and it's interesting how they're so tied in and so very similar to the gods as well. So I just thought I would share that with you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Don't forget, if you're going to add a comment, put in below it hashtag release the Snyder Cut. This is just a solidarity issue, and we hope that more people will do this, not just on the platform here on my platform and my channel, but we are trying to encourage other people to put always behind any statement, it doesn't matter what, hashtag release the Snyder Cut. Let's keep it going, guys. You guys have a great one.